We're saying, you know, following a plan is important. It's not that it's not important, but valuing responding to change, being responsive to change, is now actually going to allow us to probably plan better. So if we can respond to change, then we're able to incorporate changes as they come, versus, let's say you're planning your curriculum for the year, right? And that's something that you're doing at the beginning of the year. And you have all this curriculum planned out for the year, and you get into the class and you find out that this class is way ahead of where you thought they were. Would you still stick with that same curriculum even though it didn't serve their needs? You'd have to respond to change as you're moving through your material. And so that's a really big one, I think, that can be thought of in an educational context as well. There is value to the items on the right. The Agile does not come and say, forget about all this stuff, just go in and get it done, figure it out as you go. But they're trying to add more value and value more the items that are on the left. So this is where I started to think about, can we create an Agile manifesto for education? And how can this Agile manifesto that you have it in your slides as well, be adapted? And maybe just take 5 minutes and see if we can write one for education. And if there are items that can be transferred as is, that don't need to change, then they don't need to change. But think about some questions. So for example, who's the customer in this case? What can be considered a contract? Other key terms that you can maybe look at and change in that document. And so work together in your groups for 5 minutes, and then each table can present to us their Agile Education Manifesto. But I would like to get maybe each table, share one, and then we'll come back around. Share one and your thought process behind that line. So.
On this.
You want us to do the first one or which one?
Whichever one you guys want.
So we did the working software one, we changed to successful students over test scores.
Successful students over test scores. Nice. Do you want to provide any other commentary on that one?
On that one, I think what it was is we were trying to look at the idea of what a deliverable that we're supposed to produce.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're looking at students that can do fantastic things is what we're looking for. So.
I love that, because it kind of changes the paradigm a little bit from like a deliverable, like software, and makes the students what you're actually producing, successful students. So that's great. Can you all choose one maybe and share?
I can speak to the first one.
Okay.
We talked about the fact that relationships that are developed in the classroom between a teacher and a student can be far more important oftentimes than the results on a test.
Okay. So student-teacher relationships.
And that can be in terms of providing an environment where they're safe to express their opinions.
Great.
Or their ideas. You know how kids are afraid to raise their hand because
Yeah.
the answer might not be what someone else is looking for. So it's just a safe environment to share what they're doing.
Great. Great, thanks. How about you guys?
We got a couple of things. Well, we had some lengthy discussion about this one in particular, but we also looked at that second one to change it. The words that we picked were develop mastery over meeting requirements.
Nice. Oops.
We did also talk about number 3, responding or customer collaboration, student collaboration, not student to student to student to teacher, getting the students' input and buy-in into something.
Mm-hmm.
An example I was talking about is if I'm giving them an assignment to design a poster, I could say you are all going to design a poster that is 12 by 18 inches vertical, and give them very specific specifications, and it has to be on a a public service announcement or an event, I could say, what would you guys like to do? You know, do you want to do a poster, you know, let's talk about this, we're gonna have to narrow it down, but let's collaborate over this, and that gives them the buy-in, and I've done that with that specific assignment, and it's really helped. I taught it both ways, and the collaboration way was a lot more successful, a lot more.
So input,
Students
so
were
the
much
student
more
input
excited.
in terms of the collaboration.
Yeah, getting their input into the
Yeah.
planning of what we're gonna do.
Cool. All right.
One thing that we said kind of along some of these number three, but we said that the student growth and the improvement that they have in the classroom is more important than reaching a predetermined level. Every student comes in the classroom with different skills, and to get every student to the same exact level is hard, but what we should focus on is the improvement of each individual rather than one specific skill they all have to.
The Agile Manifesto, moving on, besides just the values, so what we talked about were values. So what do we value? There are also 12 principles that the Agile Manifesto is based on. And I'm not going to run through those. We do have limited time. I want to make sure to get through all the material, but you can look them up on that same agilemanifesto.org link. There's a section for the principles, and you can read through those. But really, I did want to talk about the key Agile principles and takeaways and how they relate to your environment. And just to think about these key terms. We can elaborate on each one of them more as we go on and as you have questions or discussion items. But collaboration, right? And so collaboration with the student, with the class, with the teacher, with the district. So collaboration and thinking about it kind of on a constant basis. How can I collaborate more? Continuous feedback and improvement. So, educational models have evolved in the same way that software development and product development models have evolved. And instead of just doing a big test at the end, how can we constantly get that feedback within the course of a class or a semester or whatever it is, and improve our offering and how we're offering the material to students? Self-organizing teams. I blame my 2-year-old for that. So self-organizing teams is a big deal when you're in an Agile environment, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail later. But think about that in context of your students too. How can you get them to self-organize and have that accountability? And we'll talk about that specifically to your question. Simplicity. So sometimes this is really interesting and important, both in software and education, because sometimes things don't have to be complex in order for them to be great, and in order to deliver a great product, it doesn't have to be complex. If you can figure out a way, so one thing that we try to do in our team, for example, in the team that I work with, is how can we fulfill that requirement while writing the least amount of code? How can I write the least amount of code and write the smallest amount of code that will actually fulfill that requirement? And it gets you to think about, what is that requirement really saying? Is it saying that I need to, go and build a 3D model of a whatever thing? Or can I just show a picture that depicts the whole meaning of what I'm trying to get across? So just, thinking in terms of simplicity. Retrospectives, and we'll talk about those in a little bit too, but how can you incorporate the concept of retrospectives into your classes? Not only with your students, so let's say you're working on a project with your students, or that you have them working on projects. How can you get them to retrospect as a team? And how can you have retrospectives with your students on the class, but also with your school, with the district? How can you guys become great facilitators of retrospectives so that maybe you're even brought in to lead some kind of a reflection type meeting with the district or with your school board or whatever it is? I think that this one is kind of, some people say if you take one thing away from Agile, take retrospectives. So we'll talk about that in a little while. And then frequent and continuous delivery. So you guys also mentioned this, and so kind of chunking things into pieces that you can deliver on constantly and frequently. So instead of, again, waiting until the very end of a term or a semester, what milestones can we reach along the way? And then the inspect and adapt cycle. So this is one where we have so Deming was someone who brought a lot of concepts and improvement into quality assurance. And there's the inspect, adapt loop. But at the core of all of them is this, so plan something, keep it simple, keep it, small size, something that you can figure out and do quick, and then do it. And then check it, inspect it. Is it working the way that we thought it should work? And then based on that checking, act. Even as a team, plan to work on something, do that thing. Check, did we work together well as a team? What could we have done better? And then act and make changes based on that inspection. Something that I learned about education, I was looking through some educational kind of developing your material or your coursework, and I found a process that was so similar that it was really interesting. So course planning would come first, and then going to lesson delivery, and then student assessment. And then course evaluation and revision. So instead of having those be just sequential, one to the next, and then ending with the course evaluation, how can you kind of incorporate that loop within the course and do that at regular intervals? Those over the weekend development cycles and working in the middle of the night, and Agile really came and said, let's stop doing that. Let's figure out a sustainable pace for our teams and stick with that. And that's what we're going to base our estimates on, and that's what we're going to base our timelines on. And for students too, thinking about that in an educational context, we want to push people because that's how you get them to grow. But where is that point between pushing people and something that's just not sustainable? Agile redefined for us today an iterative and incremental approach to achieving an end result, whether that's a product, a project in your classes, a goal, successful students, that incorporates continuous feedback loops, adaptability, and collaboration. So very transferable. And again, Agile is not just for software. They are being used, Agile methodologies are being used in industries including marketing, sales, insurance, legal practices, academics, and even, so going all the way around back the circle and coming back to manufacturing. Now manufacturing is using Agile, which is really cool. In family life, and this is something that I do at my house too, so there's an Agile parenting video, and this guy was talking at TED Talks, and he was talking about how he uses Agile concepts to get his kids out the door faster in the morning. And then there's another case study link in here that you can go and read up about, and then another case study that was about Agile being used in an academic setting for higher education. All right, so let's talk a little bit